We've ranked classic thrash. Now it's time for the new school.
Okay, fellas, make room. New blood coming in.
Today we're ranking 15 thrash metal debut albums from the 2000s, starting with Evile and Enter the Grave in 2007. The Slayer influence is very strong with this UK band's debut. Matt Drake even sounds quite a bit like Tom Araya on vocals. Fortunately though, Evile put their own spin on the sound with some bluesier, groove-ridden riffs to break up the Malevolent tremolo picking. The album was produced by Flemming Rasmussen, who had worked on 3 albums with Metallica, who the band claims they only emailed for a laugh and didn't think he'd actually respond. Banger tracks with fun topics covering everything from Countess Bathory and witch hunts to films like First Blood and Gladiator.
Oh, the movie. I didn't see it. I'm an asshole.
Total ripper of a record that was very well received critically for obvious reasons. These days, I don't care much for their new material, but this album is a must listen. It is going to perfection. Next up is Municipal Waste with Waste 'Em All in 2003. The way these guys do crossover, I frequently put them in with the classics like DRI and forget that they came decades later. Now, this is not the first album I'd recommend to a new listener, that honor going to The Art of Partying, but regardless, this is like a 5-hour house party crammed into like 15 minutes. It's no wonder why their first show supposedly ended in a small riot.
Let's tear this place apart!
Good idea!
Every second of this debut is fine-tuned to get you pumped, right down to the movie samples and even the sound of a beer can opening on the aptly named Drunk as Shit. Fun album, just not one of their best. I'm gonna put this one at great tier. Next up is Legion of the Damned with Malevolent Rapture in 2006. Always glad to see some death thrash on the board, and a Dutch one nonetheless. Lyrics are focused on occult themes and the apocalypse, befitting of the darker tone of the music. Definitely some of the harshest vocals on this particular list, but not to the point that the message ever gets lost. Very hostile, chuggy stuff that, as far as the classics go, I'd compare to German thrash legends like Creator and Sodom. It's a good listen with a threatening vibe that really goes for the throat, but I do find the songwriting to be a little bit dull and repetitive. Not as many standout hooks. I'm gonna put this one at good tier. Then we have Lich King with Necromantic Maelstrom in 2007.
In the hills, past the wretched abyss, through the reeking bones and carrying this.
One of a few loved or hated vocal performances we're going to talk about here. I like this one a little bit better than Gama Bomb in its kind of hardcore aggression, but once more, it is way too loud compared to the other instruments. And likewise, the riffs, from what I can actually hear of them, aren't really interesting enough to make this really worthwhile in terms of a recommendation. I'll give them that track names like Caveman Aggression and Bleeding and Screaming are perfect descriptions of their sound.
Booga booga!
As far as other albums you should check out from this band, the highest fan rated ones on Metal Storm are World Gone Dead and Born of the Bomb. I'm going to put this one at okay tier. But next up is Havok with Burn in 2009.
What you thought was not a reason why.
Time to head over to Denver, Colorado, one of my favorite modern metal scenes across genres. This entire album was recorded in singer-guitarist David Sanchez's mother's house, aside from the vocals. Another solid ripper that's right up my alley with that breakneck pace and earworm hookage. Solid dynamics too, with some more Metallica-esque atmosphere sections as with Identity Theft. The vocals are probably the weakest point for me, but they're not bad, they could just be a little bit better. Ivory Tower and Afterburner also standouts here. This one's going to fantastic. Y'all, if you're enjoying the video so far, be sure to hit the like button and share your own thoughts on these albums and others you might add as we go along. But next up is Bonded by Blood with Feed the Beast in 2008.
First gate of hell is where I first fell, seeking for eternal life.
True to their name, the band very much follows in the footsteps of Exodus in regards to their sound. Fun, head bob-inducing riffs, a bit of a crossover energy, and kind of eccentric, nasally vocals are very much the name of the game, and I'm here for it. Plenty of just balls-to-the-wall tracks here like Self-Immolation and Vengeance to completely thrash your face off. Punky D-beats basically all the way through this album's duration too, so I'm in heaven. Another album that just feels like a non-stop rager of a house party, right down to the Ninja Turtles theme cover. For me, I'm going to put this one also at perfection.
I am a golden god! Yeah!
Then we have Avenger of Blood with Annihilation in 2005. Another super aggro album here, kind of mixing Creator, Sodom, Demolition Hammer, and Abomination. The raw production and that punchy snare really amplified just how violent this thing sounds. Kicking off strong with the title track and carrying through into the banging scent of death. After that, it feels like it loses some steam and gets a bit repetitive, though it rallies here and there as with the fiery conclusion of Trapped in Time. Nothing amazing, but still a solid listen worth checking out. I'm gonna put this one at good tier. Then there's Toxic Holocaust with Evil Never Dies in 2003. This project hails from Portland, Oregon, and impressively the entire debut is performed by Joel Grind on all instruments. I dig the harsher speed metal vibes, calling back to the likes of Venom with the raspy vocal delivery in particular, not to mention some really fun high-octane riffs with a bit of a retro flair right down to the production choices again, and fun punky drumming, especially that intro to XX Executioner. Nothing earth-shattering here, and pretty samey throughout, but at 32 minutes it knows exactly what it is and nails the target it seems to be shooting for, so I'm gonna put this one at great tier. Next up is Gama Bomb with Survival of the Fastest in 2006.
Man of science misuse their deceits, taught them to rip and to slay.
Always happy to get an entry from Ireland, but unfortunately I think that for many this is going to be another case of you either love the vocals or hate them. Personally, I don't really care for them, and it's not just the performance, it's the production.
I'm afraid you're just too darn loud.
Like I said before, compared to the guitars and drums, they are just way too loud and forward in the mix. There are albums where I can look past that, but honestly the songs just aren't good enough to overcome that threshold in my opinion. Some solid riffs and killer solos, but yeah, this one just mostly irritates me. They have better albums you can check out, but this one's going to okay tier. Then there's Violator with Chemical Assault in 2006. Time for some Brazilian thrash metal. Atomic Nightmare kicks this off at 11 and never lets off the gas till it's over. Insane grinding speed is the biggest draw for this one, and man is that right up my alley all the time, every time, in case you hadn't already figured that out. Full aggro thrash without a single care beyond punishing the listener as harshly as possible. Addicted to mosh indeed. Gotta love those gang vocals, and The Plague Returns also has some fun shoutouts to classic 80s thrash albums. I'm putting this one at fantastic. Moving on to our final column, we have Warbringer with War Without End in 2008. True to its album art, this album really is a tank bulldozing its way through anything and everything in its path. Likewise, the songs are all very focused on the horrors of war, with titles like Systematic Genocide, Shoot to Kill, Combat Shock, and of course, Total War.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Very classic era riffing to the point that if someone handed me this and said it was recorded in '89, I would have wholeheartedly believed them. Great production and a very organic live sound. I can almost see the drummer in my head just going nuts on the kit from just listening to this thing. I put this one about on par with Toxic Holocaust in that it's fast, fun, and totally ferocious, but also maybe a little bit paint by numbers, so it is going to great tier. Then there's Short Sharp Shock with Short Sharp Shock in 2006. That was really a pain to say. More crossover thrash here from the UK, with their name deriving from a line from the 1885 comic opera The Mikado, describing a short but severe punishment. Arguably the most straight up punk sounding album on this list, especially with that bass guitar and the English accent giving off a bit of that old Sex Pistols energy.
Oi, governor! Quantum spammer up and out a minute!
17 tracks, most of which just run between 1 and 2 minutes for a very focused punch. Once again though, the compositions feel a bit on the generic side, very little here that really sticks with me, save for a few like Damaged Goods and Overload. If you like early DRI or classic punk though, definitely check these guys out, but on this particular list it just landed at okay. Next up is Lazarus A.D. with the Onslaught in 2007. This is one of only 2 albums released from this Kenosha, Wisconsin band, initially self-produced and then re-released by Metal Blade in 2009. And it's nice to see some fellow Midwesterners really representing with this album. The guitarists feel as if they take a decent amount from melodeath and groove metal in addition to thrash, and I also really enjoy the rebellious crossover attitude of the vocals. Throw in some DB transitions and start-stop riffs on Those Shall Not Fear, and you've got a recipe for some serious headbanging. The only thing I don't like are the occasional Yarly vocals, but these are really few and far between. So overall, start to finish, really great, going to fantastic. Then we have Skeletonwitch with At One with the Shadows in 2004. Now, I almost considered skipping over this album as I love this band, but even they have more or less disowned this album, letting it fall out of print. And I kind of get it as it just doesn't have the usual hallmarks of the band, and it's clear that they were still figuring things out. The riffs don't have that same trademark quality, though they have their moments with some of the harmonized leads. The vocals lack that phlegmy bite and instead just sort of shriek their way through the record. In comparison to Beyond the Permafrost and the albums beyond it, it just doesn't come close to the same bar. That said, it's still worth a listen in the world of black and thrash, and it's not without its standout characteristics in this particular list. And hey, if this video does well, I'm hoping we can cover Beyond the Permafrost next time in the second album list. But as far as this one goes, it's going to good tier. And then there's Vektor with Black Future in 2009. It almost feels unfair including these guys since they just barely made the tail end of the decade, and I do consider them to be more representative of the 2010s movement, but regardless, they are one of my favorites. Take Killing Technology era Voivod, shoot it up with PCP, and crossbreed with Abzu for good measure. The result is one of the finest progressive thrash bands to ever pick up their instruments, and right out of the gate at that. Every track is a journey in itself. They utilize every second of these lengthy runtimes. Overall, at least in my opinion, the most impressive and ambitious album on this list by a mile, and the craziest part is it's not even their best album, but you know this has to go to the top of perfection. Y'all check out this playlist for more thrash metal videos, including rankings of classic 80s debuts, and again, let me know how you would rank these albums down in the comments. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.